You guys remember that $14 block? I mean, it kind of sort of worked, but like I told you guys, that was from way back before any of this modern hardware was here. Well, that $19 block I bought finally arrived, and I figured we should at least compare it to something much more expensive to it. So I just randomly grabbed our Corsair XC7 RGB Pro to see how a $19 block compares to like a $100 block. NZXT's build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. Don't want to spec it yourself? Then choose from BLD's pre-configured player PC systems designed to fit your needs and budget. To see the full lineup and specs of the NZXT BLD Player Series pre-built PCs, follow the sponsored link in the description below. Okay, so let's start with what you get with a $100 block. I've not used one of these Corsair blocks actually in quite a while, to be honest. They're gonna have everything you need, obviously, thermal paste pre-applied or screen printed onto, the block. They're gonna have all the mounting hardware. They're gonna support several socket types. There we go. Installation manual. This one is RGB, as you can see, so it comes with a JST to RGB adapter there. Here's the block itself. It's basically uses like the exact same type of mounting mechanism, honestly, as like the Asetek stuff, which has always been interesting to me when it comes to Corsair. Check it out. It actually has my logo printed on it. This was one of those like test runs they did where they checked my logo on there when we had the J2 Sense edition. So what we're really testing here is not how does it compare to a Corsair XC7. It's how does it compare to technically a J2 Sense edition XC7, because it is the same cold plate. So if the $20 block performs just as good, or ironically, if it's any better,
that'll be your face.
That'll be my face. Okay, anyway, this one obviously supports AMD as well, AM4 and AM5, so it has a retention bracket there. It's got the back plate for the Intel. This was the major reason why this block performed so terribly for us, was because of the fact that getting it flat on such a big IHS versus the size they were when that came out, which was the small square IHSs, it's very difficult because it's just a Phillips screw with a nut and a washer and a spring. Like, that's it. There was no thread stopper or whatever to make sure that it's perfectly flat. So you tighten down one side too far, it can lift and make it not be perfectly flat. And I have a pretty sneaky suspicion that that's what's happening with that. So having these back plates like this, and then obviously with these screws, as you look at the tip of the screw, you can see they can only go down so far. So just like with the AIOs, you basically tighten them down until they stop, and there it is, it's installed. So yeah, and we're not gonna be using this thermal paste with it, unless this one comes with thermal paste, and I guess we'll be seeing how the thermal paste compares. If it doesn't come with it, I'll have to use the same thermal paste for both, which will probably end up being like MX4 or something like that, which is cheap and available everywhere. So we're not having thermal paste be a huge indicator or a huge impact on our performance. Anyway, as you can see, the packaging is obviously much less exciting. It's from that Dracena brand or whatever, which is like the bamboo tree. It says it supports LGA 11.5X, 2011 and 2066. It doesn't say anything about AMD, so already we get no support for AMD. If it supports 1156, it should technically be able to work on any modern LGA 1200 or 1700 board, because most boards have the elongated holes to make sure that they'll fit for backwards compatibility. Technically, it comes with thermal paste. I'm not sure there's enough in there, to be honest, I'm just gonna use my own thermal paste. There's obviously not enough in there to cover the surface area of these modern blocks. Biggest thing though, as you can see, we do have the back piece, the back plate that will give us, well, it's not the highest quality thing I've ever felt, to be honest. At least it has a plastic or nylon piece here to protect it from making contact with anything on the back of the board metal-wise. You can see it does have standoffs on there, which are gonna push through the board that you can screw down on. So this is a huge upgrade already versus the other block just to have that piece. I was like, why is it so cloudy? It's supposed to be clear, but yeah, it has a little cover on it. It's kind of yellowed already, actually. Slightly yellow. Anyway, as you can see, this one has a much more thoughtful design on it, in that it has a little bit of a jet plate. It has like a flow plate in there to force everything through the fins. It has actual fins, where the other block just has like these pillars that stand straight up out of the block. It looks like out, I believe out is gonna be this guy, and in is gonna be that guy. That looks like that inlet's designed to force it through the fins. Fortunately for this, there's no logos or anything. So say I needed the inlet on that side to be over there, I can just, there it is, it's on that side. So that's kind of nice. If there's a logo and it goes upside down, that'll trigger people. Let's take a look at the cold plate surface area. Oh, that's very polished, actually. The other one I showed was very rough. This one's actually very mirrored. Like I can actually, see if I can get the glint on you. Swing, 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 swing. So that's not bad. It's very smooth, but there's some machining lines on there. I don't know if the light can show them, but there are some, you can see them, but you can't really feel them. So we should be able to get a pretty good contact. I have no idea if it's concaved or convex because I don't have a scanner like Steve has to be able to see all that. I don't have a spare 60 grand laying around to buy one of those, but you know what? Maybe it's on the list someday. Moving on, the hardware. This is where the other block really sort of lacks, is any sort of thoughtful hardware. So it's hard to see. We have a bunch of clear washers, which will go, I'm assuming, on the motherboard side maybe. We have 4 springs. We have threaded standoffs, very fine threads though. I'm a little concerned about the diameter of these. The only reason I say that is if you were to over tighten it, because as you can see, it is hexed. So if you use any sort of like a deep well socket or something on that and you over tighten it, I wouldn't trust this metal. I mean, both these pieces of metal, like the screw is very light, very lightweight. I think I'll weigh it just for fun, but it's Chinesium. That's the best way I can put it. So I wouldn't trust over tightening it. Otherwise, I feel like it could just snap. Yeah, I was worried about that. The scale's not able to pick up the weight of this. I mean, even a small scale can do it. The hell's happening here? Okay, forget it. It's too light. Yeah. But this one here will be a lot easier to get consistent pressure and keep it flat because of the fact that we can literally, well, there is a, so the thread does stop, but the spring is much, I have a feeling I can actually go down to where they stop, and I'll test that. I have a feeling that I should be able to bottom this out. Yeah, I should be able to bottom that out, no problem. Because even if I go full bottomed out right here, see the spring still loose in there? That's because the space between the board and the block will be eating that up. So I should be able to get pretty even pressure across it, which is my only concern with the other one. First things first, I gotta get that one out of there. And fortunately I have the part I use as being able to put fluid in, a fill port, can also be a drain port, fortunately. So let's fast forward through all that crap. So you can see how the mounting bracket around the block has the elongated holes to fit with the other widths of Intel sockets. Unfortunately, the backplate they send me really does only work with the 11.5X. So now I have to figure out something that fits on the backside there to be able to at least get this block to attach. As long as I can get the block to attach flat, we can see how well the block performs, but now obviously that means 12th, can't use it anyway, 12th, 13th, and 14th gen cannot work with this block with this backplate that comes with it, which is okay because this really does feel very, very cheap. It's not even flat either. Tried to use the EK1. It does work. Unfortunately, the threads, as you can see right here, they're not long enough to make it down to the EK part. Like if I flip it over backwards, I could probably do it. I just wanted to point that out real quick while I'm doing the install. So I guess we're going to figure out what kind of compromise I can come up with here. We'll make something work. Ironically, the Corsair one works. So it's up and running, and you'll see there's some floaties in there. Like it almost looks like a mist. I have no idea what that is. It could be something that was on the block. Maybe that wasn't cleaned out. Remember how I said the block had kind of like a yellow look to it? It's possible we just contaminated our fluid. But anyway, our package right now is chilling in 33, 32, 31, 29. There were some background tasks that were currently going, so I want to make sure for those to end, but as you can see, everything's looking pretty good right there. So we're running Cinebench R23. It should land around the 30,000 mark, 28,000 to 30,000, depending on boosting. The previous block that we used, as you guys saw, was complete junk. It was like 88 to 90C without overclocking or boosting or anything like that. So if I just go and hit start, let's do a sanity check. As long as it doesn't hit 100C instantly, hey, look at that, we're at 5.3 all core, there's 80C. So if I look at the cores, that's actually not bad. Yeah, look at that. The cores are in the 70s, high 70s, low 80s. Max temp was 83 for a split second. E-cores are down in the 60s. 225 watts. I do have it limited right there. There's a 30,708. So $5 more already made it a much better performing block, because if we let it go to the 253, which was like the extreme profile for Intel, and that's the problem with Intel right now, we don't know what the heck freaking settings we should be running. So everything right now is set a little conservative for me. So I have it set to 225 right here. Same thing at home. I'm running a Skunkworks big old 13900K with a giant loop on there. I have it set to 253, which is the stock settings and amps and everything on there. So no overclocks or anything on that. Let's run this again right now and see how it does on a back-to-back. So there's 50, 69, 79, 82. And it is running the MX4 pace. I want to point that out. We're on the same pace because that's what I ran on the other block. I'm really curious as to if the Corsair is going to give us any better performance, to be honest. I hope it's like 10 degrees colder, just so I can be like, see, expensiver is betterer. But we all know that's not true. Yes, 30,687. So again, this is a $19 block. Of course, it didn't work initially, simply because of the fact that the backplate doesn't work with this board. This is kind of a downside of this board too. So most of, like I said, motherboards have the elongated holes so that you can use the previous version offsets. But unfortunately, this board, which is a more mid-range, kind of low mid-range board, for whatever reason, they didn't do that. So, okay, now we gotta take it all apart again, drain it, put it in the other block, put it back together, refill it. We'll be back. Interestingly enough, if you look at the CPU itself, you can see it's fully covered with paste, but it's also got all those peaks and valleys on there, which tells me I don't think it actually got a very good mount and still gave us 80 to 82C. When you get a good mount, most of it squishes out. And when you take the block off, you're left with a very thin layer of paste that you can see the IHS and through. So both sides still have a lot of thermal paste on there, which tells me that I don't think these screws actually tighten down far enough. And the Z-axis height of Intel hasn't changed with the socket itself. So that's actually even more impressive, to be honest, given the results. All right, anyway, we're gonna go ahead and go to the Corsair block now. We're not gonna RGB it up or any of that crap. So in is on the right. Good, that's what we want. So let's get this on and see. I'm thinking based on that result, I'm expecting this to be well into the 70s, to be honest. And I think that's gonna realistically come down to a just better engineered mounting mechanism. All right, there's the Corsair block right there. Doesn't look bad in there, actually. The black looks good. Anyway, you can see the temps already in idle are even better. 28, 29, mid to low 20s on the P cores. E cores are down in the mid 20s. It's already better. And then one thing to keep in mind when it comes to CPU block testing is just like an AIO, there is a thermal limitation to the system. But one of the things we're looking for is the initial spike temp. The initial spike temp are going to tell us a couple of things. One, how much temperature is that block able to transfer from the die through the TIM, through the IHS, through the thermal paste, through the cold plate into the fluid. There's all those like Big Mac layers of stuff that have to happen. So a bad cold plate design or something that doesn't have an efficient thermal transfer will show a big spike right away. And then over time, there could be some climb, and that's gonna be indicated by how much radiator surface area and all that stuff that we have. So we're really looking for our spikes here to see how these temps do. So here we go, multi-core, starting it up. Should be 225 watt. There it is at 80C. Ooh, this is 89, 91, 93. What is happening? Wait a minute. Sometimes what can happen is those little holes that have to go through the motherboard, one of them can get like stuck on the lip, and then that makes one side get tighter than the other, and then it can lift it up. So I'm gonna turn it off and check them out real quick. That is an anomaly result that immediately makes us go, let's sanity check everything. Fortunately, I can take this block off with the soft tubing, get it out of the way enough to double check all the mount, and then re-thermal paste it and put it back. Can't do that with rigid tubing. Okay, so the situation was exactly as I described, and I took it apart. I can't really show you, but those little pins that are designed to go through the motherboard holes, they can slide, and one of them slid out of the hole, So I was able to get all 4 mounts on there, but the problem is the gap on that one wasn't correct. So it wasn't allowing the block to go all the way down on that side. So it was lifted a little bit. That was actually really obvious too when I looked at the thermal paste and the way it was all squished out on one side. So I essentially like wedged all the thermal paste out one side and then it had no contact on the other half. So it appears to be nice and tight now. Oh, something else that happened too, because it wasn't fully tight and the block wasn't seated all the way down, because it has that Asetek style mount, the block unclicked itself. So it was able to push out a little more. So that's one thing I don't like about the Asetek style mount is the fact that without it being mounted to the block itself, there's another point of contact that something could get jumbled up. Not usually a problem. I've installed a ton of these blocks before. It's the first time I made that user error, but that was 100% user error. Okay, so here we go. All settings you'll see is exactly the same. It should go to about 225 to 230 watts on our limit, 5.3 all-core. Look at that, 78, 79, 80. Wow, still, this is not looking too good for the more expensive blocks. I forget the cost of the XC7. I need to look this up. There's a ton of reasons why I would still choose a more expensive block over a $19 Amazon special. And we'll talk about those here in just a sec, but let's see. It's $75. Okay, I think it's the XC9 that's $99 now that I think about it, but it's the XC7, yeah, it's $74.99. Oh, here's the RGB is $90, $89.99. This is like what? A quarter of the cost, right? Technically, depending on the RGB or not. This is the RGB one, but RGB doesn't affect the cooling. So you can have the same cooling for 75 bucks. It's like just over 20% of the cost. There are drawbacks though, and we're gonna talk about that right now because I've already mentioned the drawbacks are, one, this backplate didn't even work. So if you were trying to use this and you didn't have another backplate, guess what? 20 bucks wasted because you can't use it. The other thing I have a major issue with is, like I said, these screws right here. When I was tightening it down and we get to the bottom of the threads, these are very fine threads. These are like M3. They're very fine threads on both ends. I was scared to tighten it down fully because, again, it's smart that there's no hex head here because if you get a screwdriver on there, you can get way more torque on it. So the fact that it's a smooth cap means you can only use whatever finger strength fingertip strength. There.
Finger grip strength?
Finger grips, tip strength. Please subscribe so I don't have a stroke. Anyway, because it's smooth, you can only like get so much torque on it, which is probably a good thing. Like I said, I was hearing some creaking, cracking, snapping sounds that were scaring me. I was like, at any second, I'll be like, and then it'll break, I'll lose tension, and then the test is completely thrown out because of the fact that I wouldn't be able to get a good mount on it. But if you're in a pinch, or you're looking for oh, the thermal paste was still on it, and you're looking for a block that you can use for something in a very inexpensive type of situation where you're like, you know what, I just want to play around with water cooling, but I don't want to get all expensive with it. You're not running like i9s and stuff, which are pushing 300 plus watts with whatever the frick Profiler is supposed to use these days. You can get by. You can get by with it. So, can I recommend it? Maybe. Again, my only fear is going to be the quality of the hardware. I don't know anything about the quality of the nickel plating. That's the other thing too. Nickel plating can erode and flake off. You might even see it like flailing around through your system at some point because of the fact that the nickel plating quality is, in its thickness and all that, there's a million different ways that nickel plating can be done, different alloys and such. I don't know much about it. I'm not a metallurgist. What's it? I don't do metal stuff, so I can't tell you the compounds and stuff that are a problem. I can tell you some of the best brands on the planet, though, have had nickel plating flaking issues. So I kind of wish this one was just a bare copper, if you want to know the truth. But anyway, everything about it, though, does seem to be pretty decent in quality. I mean, this is just an acrylic top. The manufacturing seems to be pretty smooth. It's beveled. You saw the plating on the bottom. It's all dirty right now. You saw the plating on the bottom. It got the job, it's smooth. It had a nice spread. Everything worked fine. The cold plate's thick. It's actually it's probably about 4 millimeters thick. Maybe it's about almost 5 millimeters thick actually. The thicker the cold plate, the more capacity it has. So I think for 20 bucks, it's gonna be really hard to find anything that can beat it as long as you have a backplate solution to mount it. I could have technically used washers and a nut on the motherboard and mounted it like just independently through the motherboard. The problem with doing that is these backplates help reduce the amount of bowing that the board can have. But they shouldn't bow at all because of the fact that the threads don't go all the way down. Whereas on the cheap block, like this guy here, it's just a screw. That's all it is a screw. So while trying to find the right amount of tension on it, I over-tensioned it and it actually was bowing the board very badly. The bow is now gone with this off. So I feel like just grabbing hardware and then just tightening things down is a bad idea. Like everything you see right here, you could source from Amazon or any hardware store. And I don't think that makes a solid mounting solution. It needs to be something like this, where the heights are measured and they're by design. And fortunately, this block gives you that. So the $14 block, as I talked about in the previous video, this was a stopgap to be able to allow me to do something so that I could wait for this guy to come in and see how it performs. If the first video had included this, it would have been like, oh my gosh, this is actually really, really good. This guy unfortunately sucked only because of the fact that we couldn't get it mounted flat very easily. Anyway, there you go. Ultra cheap water cooling solution. I'll put the link down below. It's actually this is now a very solid loop with that block. So, all right guys, are you running some cheap hardware stuff, like water cooling stuff? Let me know what you're doing. What is your most ghetto setup that you've come up with? Tell us about it down in the comments below, and maybe I'll have to do a featured, like a react to your jankiest water cooling setups that exist. I think that might be fun. All right guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.